maybe where you're from. And I would also love in the chat to hear so this is about commonly made, overcoming common mistakes in psychotherapy. So I would love to hear one of your top tips that you have learned over the years, your top tips that you learned maybe from a mistake, maybe you learned it from wise advice from a supervisor or a colleague. But what is one of your top tips to avoid making common mistakes? So I'd love to see those in the chat. So go ahead and put in your top tip for avoiding mistakes, and I'll welcome everyone here. So we got Robert from Austin, Texas, Latasha from San Antonio, Joy, woohoo, who is joining us from Florida. Normally she's in Southeast Asia. Swami from Palm Desert, awesome. We got Michelle from Kansas, Brian from West Hollywood, woohoo, bracing for the storm like me. Southern California, if you don't know, we have like a massive storm coming for 4 days. We're not used to this type of weather. Melanie from Southeast Virginia. That's got to be where William & Mary is. That's where I went to college and got my bachelor's of psychology and my bachelor's in East Asian studies. Awesome. Kim from Minnesota. Dr. Hardy from North Carolina. Love it. Love from San Diego. Kathy from Marietta. Love it. Kanisha from Georgetown, Texas. I didn't know there was a Georgetown, Texas, so I just learned something. Awesome. We got folks from all over here. Woohoo! Oh, Jennifer saying thank you. She passed her test. Love it. I run a Laugh Your Way to Licensure for MFTs. So if you've got any tips, some tips you've learned from making a mistake. We all do make mistakes in this profession. Hopefully it's a dangerous profession to make mistakes, and I'll be honest, but we all do. We stumble and we hopefully learn from them. So if you've got a tip to share, please go ahead and put it in there that you've learned from over the years. Oh my goodness, we got New York, Israel, Inland Empire, which is Southern California, Norway. Woohoo, great to have you here. Kenya, love it. Hi, Nafisa, good to have you back. Finland, Brick from Finland, I love it. Wisconsin, Georgia, Mark from Europe, France, love it. Melanie's daughter's at William & Mary now, woohoo! Love it. That was a great school. Yeah, it's where Thomas Jefferson and I guess, Colonial Williamsburg. I was actually a balladeer. I sang guitar to pay for my college education, believe it or not. I sang 16th century folk songs to pay for my college education, I guess. Elizabeth from LA, woohoo! Got London, Fresno, California, Trauma Institute in South Carolina. Oh, Diana, you and I, listen more and talk less. That is mistake number one. Absolutely. Tip, be less wordy. In progress notes, woohoo! I do have a 2-minute progress note course. It's one of my best-selling courses, and it is life-changing if you spend most of your life. Feels like you spend half your work hours doing progress notes. Elizabeth learned, document. Yeah, it's a real painful one. I love it. Got Eugene, Oregon, Elk Grove, California. Israel A tip, go slowly. I love it. Another tip is document. Spend time in the front end doing good assessments and case conceptualization. Continue learning. I love it. Instead of thinking of all the therapeutic ideas you have, spend more energy coming alongside the client and being present. Oh my God, you guys are onto it. So hopefully you're going to find this talk really validating, because it is so true. And whether you're just starting out, whether you've been doing this work for 30 or more years, I think you guys got some great stuff. Hi, Andrew. He was one of my students. Remind yourself to keep the focus off yourself and put it on the client. Yes. I love it. We're all honing in on the similar things. Latasha is saying, if it's not a 100% yes, it's a no. And I think that's also like just how to manage your time and energy in the 21st century. Don't assume anything. Oh, Tammy, yes, absolutely. It's one of the reasons to go slow. I love it. Oh my God, there's so many good tips here, and I'm going to go and try to edit these out. Hopefully I'll get the chat file and we'll try to put some of these great tips here. I learned how to pay attention to how often I use my hands. It can be interpreted differently and be a trigger. Yep, especially if I come from a culture, we talk with our hands, and it usually works okay on Zoom because otherwise it's really a little more boring. So I do use my hands, but yes, you do need to be careful how you use your hand. Um, yep, absolutely. Awesome, awesome. Okay, well, it is great to have everyone here. And so today we are going to be talking about overcoming the three most common mistakes in psychotherapy and counseling. And I've been supervising literally at this point thousands of people for over 3 decades. I like to think I started when I was 12. And there are some really common mistakes, and so I wanted to just talk about these and just the way that we kind of trip ourselves up. And it's really, I think some of you you can see in the chat, some of you have already learned some of these lessons, unfortunately, the hard way. So hopefully what you're going to get today is just a clearer understanding of why some of these little things, and many of us were trained to do these. In fact, in first semester, one of the most common mistakes you were trained to do in your first semester, I promise you, and I still think we need to start there in first semester, but boy, we need to move you out of those training wheels, take the training wheels off so that you really are more effective. So some of these quote unquote mistakes are like the training wheels we put on, and oftentimes I know from what my students have told me, there are many supervisors who don't realize you're supposed to take some of these training wheels off, you know, after you get into seeing clients. So we're definitely going to talk about these because there are a lot of myths in the field that are totally wrong. I call them myths. These are like in textbooks. These are common practices that there's been some misunderstanding. And especially as we have more research, it's really, important to understand what works and what doesn't. And so I'm so excited about today. I can already tell so many of you have learned these lessons the hard way. And so I'm going to validate you, make it crystal clear, and give you some good alternatives. And for those of you who haven't made some of these mistakes, you're going to get to avoid them. So excited that you are here. And as we go along, you can put questions for me in the Q&A, and then you can chat with each other in the chat. So the chat is for between you all, and the Q&A is for questions directly for me. Okay, so let's get started. So today, what we're going to do, I'm going to just start by even looking at the broader context of where we work, and it's, and our profession of psychotherapy and professional counseling, clinical counseling in the 21st century. Because in many ways, we are making our own lives harder. I mean, life today is hard enough, but there are many places in our profession where we make our own lives harder. And it's a very difficult thing to change because you've got licensing exams and universities, and you've got existing literature, and you've got the old literature, and the new literature, and you've got the evidence-based, and you've got the third-party payers, right? You've got so many cooks in this kitchen. And you've got supervisors who were trained 20, 30 years ago, like me. So there's a lot of ways we're making it harder than it needs to be to do this work. And certainly the longer I've been teaching and supervising, the more I really think we are in a place where we don't have a choice. We have to simplify what we're doing because we're overwhelming ourselves. So we'll be talking about that. And then next, we're going to go through the three most common mistakes. The first relates to therapeutic relationships. The second is assessing progress and outcomes. And boy, insurance companies, third-party payers have us running and documenting in the wrong direction. I'll tell you that. And then looking at integrating research and the evidence base. And then finally, we're going to sum by, cultivating the habits of highly effective clinicians. And so 15% of mental health providers get consistently better outcomes, regardless of whether they're using treatment as usual, their favorite approach, or an evidence-based treatment. They just get better results than others. And these three mistakes relate to what these highly efficient clinicians do. And so I will definitely be talking about that today. And then finally, if you get excited about some of what we're talking about here, I'll share with you ways that you can learn and study more with me. as we look at ways to become highly efficient clinicians more efficiently. So become highly effective clinicians more efficiently is kind of my focus. So for the actual programs, this is a continuing education program. And so hopefully by the end, you'll be able to identify and avoid all three common clinical mistakes, learning about how empathy is necessary but not sufficient and what you need to be doing instead. 2, knowing how to track meaningful meaningful changes, clinical changes in session that are correlated with long-term gains. And then finally, understanding key strategies for becoming evidence-informed yourself. And so getting your CEs, you will be logging in to the course that you hopefully already have emails for, which is at therapythatworksinstitute.com/login. So you log in, you'll see the course. There is a quiz on the content to provide evidence to continuing education companies that you not only listen to this, but you paid attention, you learned something. Super easy. This is not grad school. This is just, did you actually listen? And then the last is to create those course evaluations that go with all continuing education courses. You get your email within 5 minutes with your certificate. And if you don't find it in your inbox, it's probably in your junk email. So we'll give you instructions about all of that again at the end. Awesome. The slides are going to be available probably tonight around 5:30. Because I like to have your attention, but I will definitely give you the slides with the references as well. So awesome. Okay. So let's start by looking at the current practice context and the ways that we and others are making our jobs harder than it needs to be. As you probably know, there are over 500 different therapeutic models, which is like way too many. And for any of you who have recently been through the licensure process, you probably recall painfully that there are 16 to 20 different theories on current exams, whether you're looking at, MFT, counseling, social work, or psychology, where we all know that most of us are rarely formally trained in more than one or two of these. And so we've created a lot of chaos for ourselves and a lot of stress for ourselves, as well as for our clients. My students who go through the licensing course will tell me, oh my God, I spent, half my time trying to memorize these 20 different theories, and it feels like I got asked about 3 or 4 of them. So it's an incredible amount of stress. It is incredibly confusing. And I think it really contributes, and there is research, it's another workshop I do, there is research that having all of these theories, having all the evidence-based treatments that we treat as something that's totally unrelated to the other, theories we learn typically in grad school, like it contributes to the burnout, where over a third of us, like 38% of people are planning on retiring in the next 5 years. Half of us feel burned out, and we're doing a lot of this to ourselves, which I think is a real ethical problem for us, especially for the educators, supervisors, people on regulatory boards. This is nuts, and we are actually harming society by making it so hard to enter the profession. Then we have the evidence-based treatments. And so, yes, if you get employed, usually at a government-funded agency, you might learn some of these evidence-based treatments, but they're nearly inaccessible. And many of the top ones are truly inaccessible to the average clinician. Of the 5 major treatments for conduct disorder and oppositional defiant, you really can't even get a book that tells you how to do it. You have to go through a program that your organization has spent $20,000 to $100,000 on to train everyone. So the research is really inaccessible. And that's the same as even with databases, with all of the research journals, which is totally unmanageable. Like academics like me can go in and find things, but it takes hours to find it. We don't have the equivalent type of databases that doctors have, where they have access to all of the studies in a synthesized way that makes it much easier for them. We don't have that in mental health, and it's hurting us. It's hurting our clients because we can't even access the research that's useful to our clients. And even the original theoretical literature is less and less accessible. You know, my graduate students, even my doctoral students, really struggle with reading the foundational literature. And I'm not even talking Freud here. I'm just talking from the 60s and 70s. That has become increasingly inaccessible to people entering the field. And then I think one of the things that annoys me the most is what I call the sibling rivalry, whether it's between different professions putting down each other, where counselors, MFTs, social workers, psychologists put each other down, or between different approaches, you know, humanistic, psychodynamic, postmodern, putting each other down. I think that's very destructive to our field. It fragments us. Rather just being thankful that we've got other people who are specialized in slightly different things. They see things in different ways, and that this is going to be a help to all of us, because there are a lot of people who need our help. Each one of us individually can't help everyone on the planet. So being appreciative of the different approaches, because different clients need different things. So let's look at mistake number one, and that is confusing empathy with having a therapeutic relationship. And I hear this from my students. My students tell me that their supervisors still preach this, and this is from the 1960s, and it's a little outdated. And even because what we know now, and the research has borne this out over the years. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Carl Rogers, and his guiding hypothesis is, are the core conditions that he posited sufficient? And the answer, research has shown, is no. So empathy is necessary, but it is definitely not sufficient. And so it may not even be necessarily the main ingredient, especially based on how you were trained to use it. So the issue, so we all need to start with empathy. So I advocate for training everyone in their first semester. They should learn how to do empathy the way Rogers taught, to make sure that that skill is there. But if this is your primary way of relating to people, there can very much be a hierarchical position, which we know is less effective in general. And it normally doesn't feel good, especially when we're working with, increasingly diverse clients who are different from ourselves. That position of hierarchy, especially the way many people teach it, is like, I can see what you're experiencing and I know what you're feeling, right? And often better than you do. I am going to put into words, better words than you can, what you're feeling. And that's how I was trained to do empathy. And I hope you weren't. If you are familiar with the Kharkov scale of empathy, boy, that messed me up early in my career, because I'm like, I want a 5, because a 5 is like saying it deeper than the client's even aware of, or 3 is just mirroring the client, right, with their empathy. So I learned empathy is like a competitive sport that can be scored. And if you did, I'm hoping you're gonna leave this workshop without that very terrible position. But it does come from, it implies a position of hierarchy. And what we want to get to is being side by side with someone and, walking with them on their journey. And that definitely, I think, feels better even when it's you. Another thing you'll hear talked about is rapport building. Like, rapport building is something I do in 5 minutes in the phone call to set up the first appointment. And I actually do it also during my policy procedures, legal, ethical disclosures, my verbal informed consent. That's rapport building should be done by then. And I do deliver that with a bit of humor and warmth. But building a relationship is far better, far more nuanced. I've had students who are in their first year of training, and they come in with me, this crazy complex, multiple, problem family, and they're just working with the kid in the school context. And I'm like, so what are you doing with this super complex case? It's session 5. And they're like, I'm building rapport. I'm like, oh no, you should have done that at the very beginning. And we need to be, much further along by session 6 than just building rapport. But many of us were trained that way, or that's what their supervisor was telling them to do. And I mean, hopefully you're going to walk away from this session knowing that there's a lot more you should be doing in those first 6 sessions. So, if we look at what a lot of the traditional therapeutic relationships teach us to do, they say, you're going to build this relationship because it's the key to opening the door to where you're going to apply your therapeutic theory. So we build this relationship, and there's certain theories where I really almost feel it's almost manipulative. I'm going to get you to like me, so you're gonna trust me, and then I'm gonna, then I'm gonna throw my, fancy therapeutic theories that know better than what you know, on you. So, hopefully, and I know this is not done in a manipulative, negative way, but the thought is still, I'm going to have this relationship because we've got to have it in order for me to do the real work, which is all of these therapeutic interventions. And therapeutic interventions can, obviously can be very, very helpful, but you want to, I hope, have a bigger vision for how to relate to clients that is, not just setting them up so that you can use these expert interventions to help them and to have more of a democratic relationship. And I think with our clients, and I think in the 21st century, that is absolutely essential because we work with clients who have very different experiences than ourselves. So we are going to try to flip the script here in terms of what the highly effective therapists do to reverse this process. So, I think of it as entering the client's world. It's really their meaning-making system. But the first thing is not so much getting them to trust us, but for us to walk in and understand their world the way they understand it. And then that becomes the key to knowing which forms of professional knowledge are going to work for them. So we're flipping it in that we're entering their world rather than trying to get them to enter our therapeutic world. We're going to enter their world, understand how they make sense of the world from within their own perspective. And I want you to think about how many times you have gone to a therapist or counselor or medical professional, and you're talking, and they might be empathetic, but I want you to think about how many times, even in a single session, their empathy made you feel less understood, right? Or that they missed the boat, they missed a detail towards it, about what was going on. And so hopefully you felt safe enough to correct them if they misunderstood something. But it's a very common experience. Most of my students who we send out to go see therapists, as part of their training, come back reporting how unheard they feel. And I'm like, okay, this is not good. First of all, you need to be speaking up. But it's so easy to do. It's so common experience. And so that is where people talked about slowing down in the comments. And I think of this as entering what's called the holodeck, the client's holodeck. I call it collaborative connecting. And I think of it as I'm entering their meaning-making system. So to really age myself, way back in the day, 20, 30 years ago, something like that, on one of the versions of Star Trek Enterprise, they were on this spaceship. There was this room that was programmable, and that's what that grid is that you see, where the user goes in, they program the logic of it. You can program a scene from the past. You can program a beautiful jungle or a beach scene to go on vacation while you're on the spaceship. But it was a room that the user programmed. And that's why I couldn't use virtual reality where you're using apps that other people have programmed. But a holodeck is a room and a world that you have programmed. And so in building and meeting our clients, I think we want to think of it as you're entering their meaning-making system. And that is what informs, right, their emotional reaction or their thoughts or their behaviors and their beliefs. And this meaning-making system is influenced, obviously, by their personal life experiences, their family of origin experiences, dominant discourses, what society says, what their subcultural groups, what their friends say, right? Our meaning-making systems are very, very complex. They have lots of different influences, but even as a client is telling a story, you want to really slow down and understand how they are interpreting it with their meaning-making system. And I use the holodeck and I use the metaphor, we are blindfolded in their holodeck. And the only tool we have to understand the world as they see it is to ask curious questions about why something happened, how they understood it to happen, how it made them, feel, or, how what they were doing is related to how they interpreted things. And so it's us really being blindfolded, trying to make sense of how all the pieces in their world fit together. And this is where, traditional forms of empathy, where your job as a professional was to know how they were feeling based on the facts of the story that they're giving you. And that can be a very dangerous thing. It can really make your client feel less understood. And certainly, if you're working with a client who's very different lived life experiences, whether it's age, gender, race, ethnicity, education level, you're likely to alienate your client using a classic way of using empathy in session. And so this curiosity makes a much safer journey, and a safer way to experience this. And I will tell you, in the course where I really teach this collaborative connecting and the therapy that works, I have this video where I interviewed my son to demonstrate it, because I thought, you know what, just watching me talk with my son to demonstrate how to do this, because we need to get into our family and loved ones holodecks as well. I thought being very non-threatening, totally easy. And I love this video because I totally get it wrong. And here I am. I feel like I'm this attuned mother who knows my kids, and it's one of the worst videos ever. But I keep it up there because basically the teacher had chastised a student in the class to the point where his classmate started crying. And I assumed that made my son feel scared, because I would have been scared in 5th grade if my teacher made my classmate cry, right? And must have made him intimidated, not want to raise his hand, right? Because that's exactly how I would have felt. But oh, no, no, no. My son, who I thought I knew so well until I used the collaborative connecting techniques to, understand, he got angry at her. He totally became dismissive of the teacher and just thought she was totally ridiculous, and was motivated to not do anything she said. I'm like, phew, I would have never interpreted that in a million years. And so even people we love and we think we know so well, you really still have to be super curious and cautious to not make any assumptions, because we all are making assumptions all the time. And all we can do is get better at recognizing our more common ones, and to stay humble enough to know when we get corrected. And I will tell you, and the research shows that you and your client can both feel the difference. And Dan Siegel, who talks about interpersonal neurobiology, talks about this concept of neural resonance, where you literally measurably get in sync with someone with our brain waves. There's this relational attunement, and clients feel felt. And it's not because we have empathy. It is because we've become intensely curious about how they experience something. We entered their holodeck blindfolded and are humble enough to ask, so when this happened, what were you thinking? How do when this and that, how did you see those two pieces? Why do you think those two things happened at the same time? And so there is this measurological neural resonance, and clients feel felt. They can tell the difference, and it doesn't take long. They can feel it over the phone. They can feel it over Zoom. And you can almost feel the story neurologically in your own body sometimes. Sometimes you'll see me wince with my clients because it's like, whoa, I didn't see that, or it's surprising, or I'm right there side by side as they are showing their telling the story. And you feel attuned as well to their story. So there really is a palpable difference here. So, and so one of the number one things, I do a lot of training now, teaching folks, to do the collaborative connecting, as part of when I teach the unifying framework, because this is the therapeutic relationship I think works the best. The most surprising thing I've discovered that I tell people is, you're working too hard, whether you're new or whether you're seasoned, that most of us are trying too hard to stay too far ahead of the client, and it actually impairs our ability to be effective. And as many of you put, what were the secrets that people posted? Most of you put this, I noticed, some version of this. So slowing down and listening longer. And so one of the top insights people say that they get is that I don't spend enough time in the holodeck, curious and blindfolded. I'm rushing to be helpful. And learning to question the assumptions in our own questions. And so I have had both highly seasoned clinicians, and actually the research is pretty clear that the longer you've been doing this, the more assumptions you're likely to make, and the less curious, the less you listen, because you're like, oh yeah, this is depression, this is ADHD, this is this, da, da, da. I got this, because I've seen this 1,000 times. And the truth is you probably have seen it, something like it 1,000 times. And yet the key is to stay slower, stay curious. And that's why I love training experienced clinicians and using the unifying framework, because they're like, oh my God, I have made this so much harder than it needs to be. Like I'm working 4 times harder than I need to. And for new clinicians, what tends to happen for them is that they're so worried about being looking like a fraud or an imposter that they're trying to throw in as many, psychoeducation interventions as they possibly can, rather than slowing down and listening because they're afraid it looks like they don't know anything. So whether you're new to this, whether you're seasoned, this is it's really been striking to me to see how common this is across the career span, that we tend to not listen enough. And I want you to go back to your own experiences with doctors or mental health professionals where you didn't feel understood. And I think that's one of the most common experiences is that and often for many of us, we feel scared to correct our doctors or therapists or counselors or social workers. And so the beautiful thing is that it really is much easier than what you're probably currently doing. And I've just had so many people comment on this. So let's look at some examples. So, I just want to share some of these. So I once had this person who was in learning how to do this collaborative connecting, and this is a great story. And there is a video out there if you have seen it, where she talks about she got pulled in, the CEO came in and asked, what are you doing? Because she ended up having, as a first-year student in an agency that had, seasoned licensed folks in there, she had the highest client retention rate. That means clients didn't drop out when they saw her. And it was because she was entering their holodeck. She was listening. People they felt like she got her. And that is so precious that I have people who see me just once a month, because they know every month they're going to come. I'm the only person in the world who can hear their story accurately, and they just want that sounding board. And I had another one, Marie was just sharing, this is a seasoned clinician, educator, been doing this for years, training people to do this for years. And it was like, oh my God, I have been making this so hard. I'm rushing in the first 3 minutes to give an intervention for this week's, solution so that I can warrant my high client fee. And I'm so much less stressed and more effective. And this is so much easier. And this is a seasoned supervisor clinician, And then I had another student who was saying that, when they started slowing down and really entering the client's holodeck, that they said, my client was like, could tell the difference. So like my client was like, this was a really helpful session today. I don't know what you did differently. And he was just like, all I did was slow down and listen more. And so, this made, the client was just saying that everything that, when Martin did speak, when he finally did jump into the, with maybe more interventions, they were totally on target. And so then the client was saying, I don't know what you did today, but this was like really useful. And he's sitting there going, oh my God, like I have made this so much harder than it needs to be. So questions to ask yourself. I think one of the things that one of my litmus tests that I see is that, am I regularly surprised by my clients, how they interpret things, how they make sense of things, how they perceive a given situation? And if you're not regularly surprised, you're probably not truly in their holodeck, and you're using too much of your own bias and assumptions. Like when my son said, I was just angry at the teacher rather than scared. I was, what? I feel that way regularly. I like to feel that way once or twice in a session. That means I'm in their world and not projecting my biases, assumptions, my meaning-making system, because most of us project our meaning-making systems onto our clients. And And so one of the other things you'll find when you work this way is that solutions and possibilities like tumble out of the conversation without you having to work very hard to come up with an intervention. About 80% of the time, I would say whatever solutions or ideas or possibilities or insights that a client gets in a session that they find beneficial, I didn't have to cook that up in my head in my own holodeck, because obviously we have our holodecks. Instead, it like falls out of the conversation and you're like, yeah, there it is. Because it resonates. It fell out of their world, so they follow through on it. Yes, I do use interventions. About 20% of the time, I really have to think, okay, so we're here, and nothing, and we're still feeling a little perplexed. Let's look at what the professional literature and theories and research has to offer us that might make sense for you. But when you work this way, you'll notice how much easier it is and how clients follow through on everything because it came out of their worldview and not ours or a theoretical framework. And just asking always, am I really understanding the situation from the client's perspective before I start applying those theories? Okay, great. So we do have a question from our audience on YouTube saying, I did recently update my structural family therapy. Can you please highlight or extend on empathy? And so, Mnuchin and was a therapist who talked about joining the family system. And although I don't think he quite meant it as deep into their system, their holodeck or their meaning-making system, there is a piece of that when you can think of, if you're familiar with the concepts of structural therapy or joining a system, I don't know if I'm joining the system so much as I'm just trying to get a tour and understand their system, their meaning-making system, how they interpret the world. And so in some ways, I think Mnuchin hints at the same type of principle that we're talking here. And I know joining may not be the right metaphor from the way I work, but his concept of we have to enter and understand how they interpret their world is first and foremost. So moving on, mistake number 2 is confusing lack of symptoms with clinical progress. And for this, we really get to thank insurance for. So this is a common one that you were trained to do, and in some ways it's hard to get out of, I'll say that much. So what insurance companies got wrong, that improvement in mental health symptoms does not equal lack of symptoms, okay? So just because the frequency, duration, severity is less, it does not mean that you've necessarily gotten better in any way that is meaningful other than for this 1 week. So you had a good week, but in physical health, that normally means your fever's gone down, your cold symptoms are better, right? That does not translate to our world. And so insurance just wants mental health and physical health to be measured the same, similar treatment plans, and just use the same system for both worlds. But it's a mistake, and especially for us as the clinicians trying to create change. Just because symptom progress in terms of frequency, duration, and severity are different, it does not mean that our client is handling stressors any differently, because there are an infinite number of external variables that could have changed to reduce the frequency, duration, and severity. They could have had a week off of work. Their partner could have gone on a business trip. They could have fallen in love, right? It could just be sunny after weeks of cloudy weather. All of these things can improve mental health symptoms, and the client hasn't done anything different. And so you just have to remember, reduced frequency, duration, and severity does not mean that any progress has necessarily been made because there are too many external variables. This is not true. And typically, viruses don't just reduce in severity, frequency, duration, or cancer. Most of the physical ailments, broken bones, usually when the symptoms get better, there's been medical progress has been made. It just is not true in mental health. And I cannot believe after decades, we're still using this to measure change. How many of you have to spray as measured by fewer depressive or anxious symptoms per week? It's meaningless in our field, and we all know it. So the only meaningful measure of progress in mental health is looking at how the client responds to the stressor or trigger that, triggers their symptoms normally, right? And so it's, do they do something consciously, choose different behaviors or ways of interpreting things to change their symptoms when they are in a similar type of situation? So what you're looking for, real progress in mental health, really means when faced with a trigger, the client takes proactive steps to reduce symptoms. Now, I know a lot of people, especially this is very popular in social media and TikTok, Instagram type conversations, where people are just cutting folks off. They're not doing things, cutting their whole, everyone who triggers them, they're cutting them all off. You're not learning how to manage your stress and symptoms better. There are abusive situations where that may make sense, but we want to look at when a client is put in a difficult, a triggering situation, can they take proactive actions to reduce the symptoms that they had been reporting, to reduce their anxiety, their depression, to their ADHD symptoms, panic, all of these. Is the client able to do something different to manage their symptoms? And if the client has not learned new skills, new ways of looking at things, new reframes, whatever, it can be cognitive, it can be behavioral, it can be emotional, I don't care what approach you're using, but is the client using something different so that they can be in a stressful situation and not have their symptoms? And so this is important. And certainly, don't get me wrong here. There are times where we have, very stressful family or work or other abusive relationship situations where the person probably does need to remove themselves from a very, very, a difficult environment. But at the same time, regardless, even if there is a boss who's super critical or a partner who's super critical, right? And even if, sometimes what you're going to learn is setting boundaries by, and speaking up for yourself, advocating for yourself, that could be the skill that they learn in the situation. So it doesn't mean you put up with being triggered as often as possible, but what it does mean is when my clients come in and tell me they had a good week, if it's due to an external factor and they didn't do something consciously different to not have such a bad set of, reactions to whatever the problem is, then I know we still have not done enough in our work to help this person have long-term mental health. So things you can do to avoid this mistake. So I'll let clients come in. I'll let them tell me about the beautiful weather, the surprise flow of money, their partners, incredible behavior this week, whatever it is, their kids, out of school, so they don't have to deal with homework. So that's why they're happier. I'm curious. I do want to know what the external factors are that make things better, that gives us clues as to what they can keep doing, right? So I listen for all of that, but I'm mostly listening for how the client responded in stressful situations. And are they conscious? And I will ask them, did you consciously choose to do anything? Is there, and even if they say, if I ask what was different this week and they list it out, it's all external, I will then follow up with, is there anything you did consciously to make this, end differently? So, and so listening for, what they did, asking for it. And when things are just better because of mostly, they were on vacation, or, their partner was in town, out of town, or their kid was, XYZ, I notice that, I listen for that. I think about how we can leverage that. But ultimately, the measure is, are they able to respond to a stressor differently? Okay. Let's see here. So I did just get a question about practical ways to enter the holodeck. Well, and I will just say, so practical skills for doing that. A lot of it is, you can practice with friends and family, because this is like not a type of intervention that's necessarily licensed. I use it with my kids to understand how their day went, but really learning to just be curious. And so, I mean, I take 10 hours to train people how to do this consistently. So it's a much bigger than a 1 hour workshop can provide. But I will just say it's really using a lot of clarifying questions. And I listen for behaviorally what happened. Like if there was a video taken picture of what happened, And then and then I use that. Do I even understand what physically happened in that room during that argument? And do I have a video? And then how did the client make sense of that video? And so, and hopefully listening for things that are unique and not necessarily interpretations, especially when clients come in and complain about their partners. Typically, those interpretations, there's a ton of history usually about how we interpret our partner or our family, our parents or our child's behaviors, right? Loaded there with tons of history. So I often really have to ask, why did that one statement lead to your interpretation of X, Y, and Z? And so it's kind of matching up behaviors with the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, the history, the family origin stories, the dominant discourses that go. Hopefully that kind of helps you get a sense of how to do this, but it's a real discipline, believe it or not. It's a real discipline to be truly curious, to understand the client's meaning-making system without constantly bringing in our interpretive system. I've been surprised that it's really the hardest thing to do. So mistake number 3 is, so let me go back here, is using theory without evidence. And most of us are trained to do this. And truly the whole field is set up so that's how we end up working, because we don't have the same tools and resources that medical doctors have that really make it easy for them to be evidence informed. We have to work harder at it. And it is generally considered unethical to just have theory-only practice in the 21st century. This is not the case when I got trained at the end of the 20th century, just so you know. But now there is so much relevant evidence to what we do that we didn't have 30 years ago. However, it is still nearly impossible for the average clinician to access these. So, and it's called being evidence-informed. And just to be really clear, evidence-informed is different than evidence-based treatment. Evidence-based treatments typically refer to you're using a manualized approach for a specific disorder. So you're using functional family therapy to treat conduct disorder, using evidence-based treatment to treat couple distress. But all of us need to be evidence informed, and that's knowing what research exists out there that relates to your client's problem, maybe the client's population, and or your therapeutic model. Actually, and is what I should say, not and or. So, but we need to know, if you have a therapeutic technique that you've been trained in, right? So what does the research say? What populations is this best for? The client population you're working with, what tends to work best for that, what meets their needs, and for the particular problem, what does research say works best for this? So the challenge really is, there's a lot of confusion of evidence-based treatments being confused with being evidence-informed. Evidence-informed does not mean you've gone to a $5,000 workshop to learn an evidence-based treatment model that works with one clinical problem. And obviously in private practice, that's not really feasible, is it? You have all this sibling rivalry where we like to insult each other in the field. And I really think that needs to stop, because I really think all of us should be using, all of the 50 major theories that relate to all 500. And I certainly, started in the field with having favorites. And over the years, I realized, oh my God, I need every single theory I've ever learned and trained in. And I don't know how anyone does this work without using as many theories as humanly possible, which is why I think in the next 10, 20 years, we're all moving to a unifying framework, because there's no way to keep doing this insanity. And I've never met a theory that I did not find helpful with at least one client. So please try to be very respectful of the various approaches out there. And just the lack of user-friendly resources. I discovered this when I was hired by Scientific America to put together an article for a database for psychiatrists, because Scientific America, one of the biggest publishing houses in the world, is putting together this database for psychiatrists, so they can just log in and understand family therapy and when to use it with which population. What does the evidence base say? I'm like, they have tools like this? Why don't we have tools like this? I'm working on it, but it is really difficult for us to even get that when you want to. I've also learned, so PsycInfo is where the professors like me go, and I learned that it's really hard for a lot of graduates, if their university doesn't give you access once you graduate, or if you have to pay to be an alumni, it can be very hard to have access to that. And often the Google, is sufficient. And then there's just a general lack of awareness that even a lot of professors have been teaching for years Sometimes our supervisors have different attitudes, with just a lack of awareness of how much guidance we actually do have in the field to help us be more evidence informed. So, so some of the ways to become evidence informed is to, use Psych Info if you have access. Google Scholar is getting better. It's still much more limited than Psych Info, but any scholarly database that you have research to, and understand some of just the basic research findings, right? So for things like depression, generalized anxiety, and adjustment, typically a lot of approaches work. But then there are exceptions, right? So if you're depressed because of your partner or your relationship, couples therapy actually is warranted, and not medication doesn't help, and individual therapy can make it worse. So there is a lot of subtlety, obviously more than I can do in a 1 hour, but I have some highlights here. I mean, so for the trauma-informed approaches, you know, if you have a client with trauma, you want to understand that you build up coping skills before you dive in to analyze, and treat the trauma. You need to stabilize them first, right? Then there's certain things like OCD, phobia, psychosis, substance use disorders. They really do need very specific interventions. So for OCD, for example, 95% of people will only get better with a behavioral, exposure therapies. And I'm like, whoa, that is not what I learned 30 years ago. And now that we know this, it is really, OCD is my favorite example of, wow, the research is so striking on that. You don't have an option but to discuss using that with your client. And many clients know that. And they tell me that they've been to 6 therapists who didn't understand. And that's why they come to me, because the clients are able to find that research online, but we don't teach it and we don't know it. Not we, as a group, many of us don't teach it, don't know it. Also with child-teen, issues, that the vast majority of research is that it needs to be family-based. And that's really a challenge when so much child-teen therapy is now happening in school settings where it's hard to get families in, right? So we throw a ton of money at these programs, but there's this family piece, and the research is crystal clear that for most kids' problems, that's what they need. And just knowing like teen versus adult intervention on things like eating and substance disorder, we know there are different things work for people at different ages. So, Jeannie's asking, how do you know if theories are evidence informed, particularly in couples therapy? You've got to read the research. And so there are, a lot of the meta-analyses. Historically, for many years, it has changed in the last decade, but, like emotionally focused couples therapy and integrated behavioral couples therapy for decades have been the 2 main best researched couples approaches. So there's really just been 2 until the last decade. We have a few more that has some research kind of emerging, but those are the 2 well-established ones. And everyone coming out of a graduate program, whether you're a social worker, psychologist, counselor, MFT, we should all know these things. And we don't have great resources for it. And it really is an issue. And I'm trying to fix it. I have, that is one of the pieces I put into the unifying framework, and just give me time. I can only create so many courses at a time. So, yeah. So, okay. I have another question that looks really long, so I'm gonna have to try to answer that a little later here. But let's kind of just strategies for becoming evidence informed. Getting access to Psych Info, which can be through a public library, joining an alumni association at one of your universities that may give you access, but also Google Scholar is pretty good. And some of my clients come in with better research than some of my students. Subscribing to a psychological news channel. I read psychological research study outcomes all the time on my phone when I get the news, right? I'm always reading about the research. This is part of what I do on a daily basis. Joining a professional organization and reading the journal that comes with it. Virtually all of them do have a academic journal. All the national organizations, NASW, APA, ACA, AAMFT, all of them have a journal, and read them. And reading professional books related to whatever your area of expertise is, but you should constantly be reading. There is more than you can possibly ever get caught up on, but it is something I learn every single day a little bit more about the research and evidence, theoretical foundations of our field. Okay, so let's look at next steps on your journey. So cultivating the habits of highly effective clinicians. These are the 15% of mental health clinicians get better outcomes than other people, regardless of whether they're using an evidence-based theory or not, regardless of what therapeutic model they're using, whether they have and we see this early in their career, they tend to sustain over their entirety of their career. And so they are doing some things differently. And one of the things they are constantly getting guidance from supervisors, communities where you feel safe enough to really ask your questions and insecurities. They are constantly learning, constantly asking questions rather than trying to look perfect. No. Take off that, fear of not knowing enough. Sometimes I look at my students like, you should be asking me much harder questions than this, okay? If you just want me to say you did a great job, you're not going to get a lot out of this supervision. Ask me the hard questions. And unfortunately, work is not a place where a lot of us can get that guidance because you are being validated, or you're constantly being evaluated on your productivity and these other things. And a lot of people have told me they have found that work just isn't that safe space, and they have to find consultation groups outside of work that are where they can truly be safe, take off the mask, and talk about what the real questions are. Talk about this curiosity, really mastering, entering the client's holodeck. It takes a lot of practice, it's a lifetime. You're never like perfectly great at it because we always have assumptions and filters, but learning to really listen. So this is to get a picture of what actually happened and understand. And I just follow, it's like a breadcrumb trail of meaning. How do they go from this event to this thought, to this emotion, to this behavior? I'm like listening. And it's this breadcrumb trail of meaning. 99% of my mental energy is just following that trail of meaning. And it is, even with my clients I've worked with for years, I'm always right there because something could have happened over the week that changed their meaning-making system. And so I've got to follow how they understood how things happened this week and be regularly surprised. That really does help. Keeping your eye on the prize, knowing and watching, is my client learning to respond differently to stressful, triggering situations? That's how I know they're getting better. So I'm just always tracking that and noticing, even if it's small, so noticing what they do different week to week. I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly reading to stay up to date with the relevant research. It is ever evolving. There are thousands of research studies in our field now published every single day around the world. It is hard to keep up, honest to God, but just keep reading, keep reading. And like I say, even if it's just 3-5 minutes a day scrolling through psychological news, I'm always reading and always learning. And that doesn't end. You're never done. I promise you with that. So to get your CEs, like I said, you can go to the therapythatworksinstitute.com/login, and there is a content quiz as well as a course evaluation where you can get your CEs. It does get emailed to you. Okay. So Love is asking, do you recommend a particular platform to get a mentor? I'm on my second semester of my MFT program and I feel I need a mentor. Well, it's hard to find a mentor in this field. And so certainly you can, look at programs where there's live training. I'm going to share with you, the live program where I offer that type of mentoring, which is my Therapy That Works Unifying Framework. It's a master class. But looking for groups, sometimes they're consultation groups. I don't know if you find it on a platform, but looking for someone who you trust in either in your organization or through one of your professors, who is a safe place to do that. So that's a great question, though. It's hard to find a mentor, I think, for a lot of people, especially if your work environment ends up being more political, which most of them do these days. So as we wrap up here, as I promised in the beginning, I'm going to invite you to continue learning with me. And I offer this free CE training as just part of an invitation to the Therapy That Works Unifying Framework, which is where it's a 45-hour, it's a master class, it's 5 months long. But, I teach you these, the unifying framework synthesizes, over the 50 different theories, the entire research evidence base into a single framework. And this is where I teach new clinicians, I teach seasoned clinicians to really enter the holodeck and to use what I call a 4-level assessment that just synthesizes case conceptualization from all the different theories. And I invite you to check it out. And we actually when we talk about the mentoring, you want to find training opportunities, and they are so much more limited compared to when I entered the field in the 90s, where, you're going to watch me do therapy, right? We're going to do therapy together with a live simulated client. But you want to do as much live simulation, live training, live demonstrations with people who you're learning their approach from. And this is any approach. And they're just, I would say, less than 10% of the trainings I see out there actually include this component that used to be at every conference. And it isn't, there are legal reasons for all of that. I also include in this is this personal whole life like upgrade. And we teach you, we start with the self of the clinician. And this is, again, is another piece. I didn't talk about it so much here, but we do not talk about how to live your life as a human to do this work really well. And there are secrets to that. There are keys, there are practices. And so we look at using micro habits and setting our own goals and taking care of ourselves in all spheres of wellness. Emotional wellness, physical wellness, financial wellness, career plan, having fun, relational wellness. There's so many realms that we look at. And this module I love because most people say, I was in this to learn the unifying framework, so I had a simple way to do therapy, but that was the most valuable part, is what a lot of folks say. And like I said, I use simulated reality. I know there's some universities starting to use this, but again, medicine has had it for decades because they have more money. We're the slowest last ones to get this technology. But there's now this technology where we can work as a group with simulated clients. We can pause a session, send the client away. I can tell you, we can analyze what to do, say next. You can ask me questions, where to go, and bring the client back. And it is totally real, totally amazing. It's everyone's favorite part of the class usually. At this point, I don't know anyone else has put it into CEs, but hopefully some of you are seeing this in your university programs because it really is the future. And so, yeah, it is basically a 45-hour, it's like a semester-long course over 5 months. So it only takes an hour or two a week. There's no other homework unlike graduate courses, but really teaching you how to do therapy well. If you're feeling like, if you're new in the field and you want that mentoring support, if you're seasoned and you just want your job to be a lot less stressful, because after doing this for, a couple of decades, it should be pretty stressful. I really invite you to check this out. And it is on sale because you came to this workshop, so there's a coupon. And in addition, a $300 off coupon. There is a bonus for today where you get my telehealth best practices that includes 5 downloadable interventions for trauma, anxiety, and depression. My God, last week when I was supervising, I don't know why it seemed like every case needed one of these downloadable interventions. You can use them both in person and on Zoom or telehealth. And that's a special bonus if you register for today by the end of the day. So I invite you to check this out, to see if this really works for you. I teach this course twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. It is life transforming. You can check out the webpage and hear from my students rather than me. And I am just so excited about the future of our field. I really think we have been using very archaic methods to teach, when we're asking every licensure candidate to memorize 20 different theories, knowing that they've been trained in 1 or 2, and the test probably has questions on, 5 or 6. We've got this crazy system. We don't have a way to actually teach everyone about the evidence base that is sane and reasonable. Right now, it's still just academics. And so putting this all together into a master class, and, if you don't know, I haven't heard, I am retiring from my position because I will be writing books and articles because I really believe that this is the future of our field. I'm so excited about it. And I invite you to come and learn with me, study with me to learn about this program. So let me see what other questions we got here. So for the mentor, you can join the mentoring. Someone was asking like where to find mentoring. I highly recommend this course. Is a place for a lot. I have many first-year people who stick with me. There's a level 2 course. There's a mastermind. I have many people going through grad school who just stick with me as their mentor. I have senior people who've been doing this for 30 years who, need that safe space, especially in private practice. But otherwise, look for groups. Maybe you can connect with some folks online, but there isn't. A ton of folks doing this type of stuff right now. So Jeremy is saying many of these issues are systemic at the societal level. The medical model doesn't fit for mental health. No, not really. I mean, I still do, I still listen to duration, frequency, and document it because I do legally need to do that to protect myself. But I know that it's not the best thing. And that's what will really set you apart as a clinician who gets results. And that's how you build your practice, whether it's an agency or a private practice, is getting results. And that's why I call my framework therapy that works, because we get results. We all do. Even my first semester people are outperforming, licensed folks, because this is actually so much easier than we make it to be. So micromanaging therapist burnout, lack of resources, significant lack of resources for our clients as well. So how do we step up and fight? It's hard. The problem is there's not one. It's like if we just get through to this one person, it's all going to be magically fixed. It's like the problem is there's so many interlocking systems. Systems change very, very slowly, right? And so we have these huge, ginormous interlocking systems it's very hard to shift any one of those. And so the systems are creating harm. And I think, so this has been my answer to that question, Jeremy. I totally am on board with you. I do think we live and work in crazy systems. So I've gotten really good at doing this work. I'm get highly effective. Get highly effective. To understand the research really, really well. Get really good at diagnosis, because a lot of my advocacy is around the diagnosis, and know when, where, and how to advocate and then to create change. And so you can disrupt many of these systems. One of the things I have found, most of my clients, they only need treatment once or twice a week, even from the beginning. I mean, from the beginning, this weekly model is a very inefficient way of working. And so, but becoming really good at what you do, you can help your clients much faster. I have many clients who come and see me. I've had people on the phone talk to me for 5 minutes, because I normally don't have an opening. And they're like, oh my God, you understand me better than my therapist who I worked with for 2 years. And that's because I entered their holodeck in 5 minutes on the phone. And they can feel it. They feel felt on the phone. And so this is, some of how the individual practitioner makes a difference is you do it one person at a time. As you raise up in your system, you can, be in a position of a more power to change your organization, to create more humane systems. I just think we're creating more humane systems, relating to clients, being highly effective. So clients don't need to come see you every week and spend thousands of dollars, right, on treatment, because you're so effective. And I have some therapists like, oh my God, doesn't that mean that they're not going to come, I'm going to have holes in my schedule? I'm like, no. When you actually help your clients permanently solve their emotional problems, relationship problems, kid problems, they are going to refer all of their friends to you. Okay. And some of my clients just come in once a month to check in, because it is so helpful. And so getting good at this, knowing how to do this work well, and where and when you can, as you step into positions of power. But there's so much change you can do one-on-one. Even my individual clients are all helping their families. I have one client, this is an incredible story, and I just did a video on this. She went through horrific childhood trauma, horrific. The whole family was this intergenerational, very abusive family system. And, she has been working with me, and she's worked through her trauma. And literally, I almost want to cry. Her individual work, because I only got her husband in once, but when she was about to be hospitalized during the pandemic. But she has been able to transform her husband, her children, her nieces, her nephew, her brother, who was, for all of these years, I never thought her brother would change. He was part of this very patriarchal, abusive system. She was able to change 20 people's lives, one client, transforming intergenerational abuse. And so when you get really good at doing this work, you get into your client's holodeck, you learn how to be helpful, you change so many more people than just the person sitting in front of you. And that is what we talk about, being highly efficient and highly effective. That is how I think it's done. You are so welcome. So Erica's asking, can you apply the CEs when your license is inactive or not currently active? Well, you can always use the CEs if you're ever asked for them, and if you reactivate it, you will need them. Most states don't require CEs if you're inactive, but you have 2 years to earn them, so you can do the class now, and you can claim them at the end of the 2 years. And if you need them, then you can get them there. Oh, Lori is asking, yes, are your other offerings listed on Therapy That Works? Absolutely. The 2-minute progress note and treatment plan is on the therapythatworksinstitute.com site. Look for the Very Happy Woman Celebrating. Awesome, awesome. Okay. Is this course one class a week, or how long is each class? So 25 hours are totally online. You can watch them at your leisure. Most people, when they're driving or cooking or folding laundry, or I do it when I'm getting dressed in the morning. And then twice a month, there is a live session. Often there are multiple options for attending them, but some people choose to just do it all at their own pace. You'll get all the live sessions you can listen to. Now we're going to be giving you a transcript too as well for the live sessions. But they're live sessions. There's pre-recorded. And so there are lots of different ways to go through this program. Some people like to attend most of them. The average person probably attends about half the live sessions. And I usually have a significant portion who are just like, you know what? I'll meet you all online and I'll watch you guys. And I'm just going to watch it when it's convenient to me. So any way that works for you works for me. Absolutely. Say, someone's asking any recommendations on how to read literature outside of work that doesn't contribute to burnout and able to separate work time versus personal time. Well, I subscribe to Apple News. That's my news for better or worse. And I just subscribe to the psychology feed. And so it's more like a magazine article than a journal article. But there are some that are definitely, I get a lot of neurobiology comes across those. So that psychology, it's lightweight, it's 3-4 minutes a day. And so that's a really simple way. You can just go to an online site, like you can join Psychology Today, actually is a physical magazine if you want to get off a screen. Psychology Today is pretty reliable with some of their updates in psychology, and it's pretty broad. So that would be some of my suggestions there. Awesome, awesome. Lori, mahalo, aloha. And I hope you didn't get any of this crazy weather we're getting here. Okay, let me see. So I have a longer question here I'll answer. Would you please offer suggestions for switching from a more active stance, such as interventions, interpretations, that a particular client is used to slowing down and listening so the client adjusts to that difference? Oh. So yeah, the client may view therapy as a particular exchange between us rather than a more active role on their part. So this was complex, and thank you for asking this question. And I'm going to, so it is true, like that one intern I was talking about, so they had been more active and throwing lots of suggestions and interventions. And what they did is they slowed down, they listened, they walked side by side, trying to understand the client and their holodeck. And so they were throwing out less psychoeducation, less scripted intervention. But the client at the end said, but they did at the end come up with ideas that are helpful. Like I said, most of the time, what needs to be done to address the problems tumbles out. I don't know how it just falls out of the conversation, like falls in your lap. And I normally just sit there, I'm like, bing, there it is. And it normally will fall out, of the client's mouth. And normally both of us hear it. And it's like, oh yeah, that, logically, as we tour your holodeck, the only logical next step is X, Y, and Z. Because what is happening, and so part of the holodeck process is when you're trying to understand their interpretation, their meaning-making system. This is where I bring in the synthesis of 50 different theories, is we're looking at behaviorally what's going on, what are the complementary behaviors that are going on, what are the attachment emotions, what are the secondary emotions, what are the cognitions, the thoughts, the schemas? We're looking at what's the identity narrative? Who do they tell themselves that they are? Is that coming from family of origin? We look at dominant discourses around their social location, as well as what society says about people who have their type of problem. And none of us have put all of these pieces together in our heads. Okay. And so as we're curious, we're blindfolded, we're trying to understand their holodeck. they are seeing how all these pieces relate, how the emotions, the cognitions, the societal discourses, their family of origin narratives, the labels they got in middle school, right? They're like, oh, oh, oh. And so the insights, they're putting them together. And I remember I did have one student, like, she was a first year student in Australia, and she was like, oh my God, this is so much easier than me trying to figure out the insights for their lives. The client's putting it all together. And the two of you are discovering it side by side. And so, like, to get back to the question, so how do clients respond? If someone is willing to truly understand your life the way you understand it, we have so few people in our lives, rarely our partners, parents, or children, like almost never. You might have one or two best friends who really sit down and listen to you and understand your world the way you do, maximum. And most people don't have anything like that, okay? So, and so the clients often feel like, oh my God, I just had this whole understanding of myself and my life that's just so much deeper than what psychoeducation or a canned intervention can give them. Now, it is true. Oftentimes, I use a lot of psychoeducation and predefined. I mean, this free bonus I'm giving you is 5 downloadable interventions. Those are sort of canned, right? They do tap into the holodeck. And one of them is about, helps you get into the holodeck. But that's not where the magic happens. And like the client told my student, they're like, I don't know what you did differently today, but today was really helpful. And it was really helpful because it is so much deeper when the client understands themselves in a deeper way, when they have been so vulnerable to let you into their holodeck. You were gracious and non-judgmental. They understand themselves better. And now it's like they have this clear idea of what to do next. And sometimes it is from some kind of professional knowledge we bring into the room, but oftentimes it's because it's connected to how they already see the world. And so whatever, if you listen and you really get their holodeck, you're going to know exactly which form of professional knowledge it's like the puzzle pieces just fit. And they feel like the puzzle pieces fit. My clients do all their homework because it fits it's the missing piece in their world. And it makes sense to them. And when you pull an intervention out of a textbook or, out of left field in a theoretical world, our clients don't follow up on those interventions because we haven't connected it to their world close enough. So this is why, to answer your question, our client's going to feel like it's really different. I mean, most of us feel like it's like, oh, I can take a deep breath. You're going to sit down and listen to me as I put all these pieces together and make sense of this difficult moment in my life. Like that is, I mean, when I have a friend who does that for me, I just feel like this huge sense of relief, and I get to just be fully, authentically myself, and I can make sense of it with someone, and someone's going to be here with me in my inner world to make sense of it. It is such a precious moment. And sometimes I ask my clients, I'm like, who do you feel like really gets you? And I have some celebrity clients, and I have had multiple of my celebrity clients say something like, they'll sit there for a minute and they're like, who really gets me? And they just look at me and they're like, Diane, you are the only person who actually gets me. Not my partner, not my kids, not my fans, not my agent, not a colleague. It's like, this is the only place I get to be me. And so, I mean, even for the wealthiest people of the world, this is the most precious thing in life. And so, and when you start bringing this into your relationships, after I had that interview I told you with my son that I use in this class, it's one of my worst demonstrations ever. The doorbell rings, a dog is barking, but I'm like, oh my God, you caught me, making an assumption with my son. And so it's such a beautiful, moment to demonstrate that this is a lifelong practice. But even my son, we were done with this 20-minute collaborative connecting. I did a tour of his holodeck, how he handled the stress of his teacher, making a classmate cry. At the end, he's like, Mom, can we have more conversations like this? People crave it. I don't know how else to say it, but people will crave it. And so that is why, and this, I'm hoping to find technologies like this course. And I know it's an investment because there is an investment of time that, it does take time and practice, and we work together, and it's a real skill. And I think the one thing I'm most proud about in this course is that people leave feeling like it was worth their time, it was worth their money. They left with real skills that up level, not just their professional life, but their personal life, improve relationships. I do a whole thing on evidence-informed treatment planning. I've had multiple people solve chronic lung health issues. because the knowledge is there. We just don't have an easy way to access it. So, yeah, so to answer that question, even if your clients are used to you asking and peppering them with lots of questions and giving handouts and stuff like that, I just can promise you that whether you're working with a kid, whether you're working with someone who is, especially, who is super celebrity, other end of the spectrum, when you work with people who've been marginalized, especially people who've experienced societal marginalization, to have a place where they feel heard and understood, they're able to say all these things out loud, is so, so, um, it's refreshing to the soul. I don't know how else to say it. You reconnect with a part of yourself that is hidden from in every other facet, it feels like, in life. I work with a client who identifies as LGBTQ. Because I've specialized in collaborative therapy all the years, about a third of my practice has been LGBTQ, because there's a form of treatment. It's one of the earliest approaches for working with LGBTQ was they called it a collaborative approach, and it was not technically collaborative language systems, where I learned with Harleen, but it's very similar. And so even within the LGBT community, I have most of my clients are like, I still come here, Diane, and you're like the only place I am safe. Because even with my group of people who identify like me, there's so many politics of how to do that right well, and what pronouns to use or not use, what labels to use or not use, what's okay, what's not okay. I'm on eggshells within my own community. And this is true of people who are looking at racial ethnic communities, LGBTQ communities. Um, and so even clients who come from marginalized communities often feel very marginalized within their subcultural communities. And so being able to be, and there's no perfect, simple way to do this, because one of my clients, her situation really is, if you looked from the outside, most people would call her non-binary. It's not how she identifies. She identifies as a she. And the whole thing of putting up pronouns has been very traumatic for her, very upsetting. There's pressure to, use pronouns. She doesn't want to use pronouns. And so it's been and she, after 2 years of resisting, she put it up for a month. She's like, oh my God, it was so stressful. I just forget it. But, for her, her experience was that, now when people meet me trying to be, very respectful, and because there is a discourse where being respectful is to ask someone about their pronouns, especially if it looks like they may not be using a standard, or if they present non-binary. It's like, now that instead of asking my name, people ask my pronouns, right? So just so there's not a way to always win, but you want to create a space where clients can explore these very complex situations. And, there is no book that has ever captured her gender, sexual orientation, presentation, gender, internal identity versus how she presents versus, the sexual. There is no book I've ever read that captures her unique lived experience. But being the therapist where she can come and be all of this and not be on eggshells is so precious. So it is just so important that learning this, and I do think this is how I plan to spend the rest of my career, is helping people get really, really good at that. So I'm gonna just look here. Have I thought of being a personal mentor? So okay, I don't know if you're asking me, or if you're asking Jeannie, if you're asking Erica this question. So, I do offer one-on-one mentoring sessions. I totally recommend joining one of my courses to get that in a group format. It's much more cost-effective. But, that is what this course is. If you're looking for a mentor, I see this conversation took off, and I've been talking and answering other ones. So yeah, so mentoring, I do offer one-on-one individual mentoring sessions on my website. It's under the mentoring tab. But what I do invite you to really take this course. I know it's a time and money investment, but you do get my personal mentoring through this whole thing, both online and live sessions. And so, this is a therapy that works, unifying framework. It is an amazing community. I don't know how I get so lucky as the people who show up to these classes. But this is about people who really want to get great at doing this work. And that is what we talk about. And so we go through this journey together. We learn from each other. It's a safe environment. And part of that is we've discovered over the years, because it isn't political, because it isn't part of a work environment where you have to be evaluated by a supervisor, where you have to hit ratios, blah, blah, blah. And this is really a place where people come to learn to find their voice and their style. This was beautiful about the unifying framework. You get to keep your style. This is just a framework for doing. It's not a theoretical orientation per se, because we don't tell you why people do what they do. But we mentor you, and I have many people who have just stayed with me. They're like, last summer when the level 2 course, they're like, you can't leave us. You can't leave us. You're where I come to get my supervision, my mentoring. Like, I can't be on this journey without a safe space. I also have an option of something called the Clinician Connection that has one live session per month where you get tons of pre-recorded CEs is another way to stay. So some people just stay connected with me through that. So, any of my classes that have the live components, you are welcome to join. And I try to give tons of mentoring because that is certainly, I think, what we don't do enough of in this program. I am going to periodically, I will offer like a 6-month mastermind. That's a case consultation where you get clinical mentoring. There'll also be one for, entrepreneurs and thought leaders in mental health for people who want to do content creation, write books, academics who've got to write articles. So also I'm going to create smaller group mentoring options. Oh, thank you, Nafisa. Thank you. She says she has taken the level 1 and level 2, and I got the chance to seek advice and guidance. Yes, from the live sessions. Yeah, and Nafisa is based in Kenya. Incredible work there. And thank you so much for even sharing. She got to share some of her cases, which just incredible. So thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, I'm getting some questions now from YouTube. I see a connection from between systemic, Bowen family systems, Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, Freud, and new solution focus, brief only. So yeah, and I'm right there with you, Steve. When the unifying framework, there is a YouTube video. I've described it in my 4th edition of my Mastering Competencies. I hope to in family therapy book. I hope to have a book out, an article out in the next year on it. But yes, it is stunning how much overlap there is, because I can basically, create 4 different levels with 2 parts each. So truly there's 8 different layers there. That really sums it all up. And there's this one level, it's called looking at complementary patterns. And like you're looking at Joseph Campbell, systems, Bowen, Carl Jung, Freud. Yep, every last one of them does some way of doing complementary patterns or polarities. And, they just call them all such different things. And this is where the really deep conceptualization comes from in most approaches. So what's interesting is, like, when I find, and someday I'll write a whole book on just that one level of the 4-level assessment, the complementary patterns. It is jaw-dropping, eye-opening when you realize, Carl Jung's polarities line up with Bowen's, triangulation and differentiation, and Minuchin's types of boundaries, and Fritz Perls, different parts of the self with internal family systems. And it's got 3 different kind of polarity pattern going on there with psychodynamic and attachment theory. You're like, oh my God, it's beautiful. And it's like, but we are making ourselves crazy with so many different systems for doing the same thing. But the truth is, you normally need to pile several of these on top of each other, and that's what the unifying framework does, is it allows you to pull in cognitive approaches, emotional approaches, behavioral approaches, societal discourse, looking at social location, all in one place. And that's where it all comes together. So yes, Steve, yes to each and every one of those. Janine is asking, do I do anything specific with couples therapy? Absolutely. So the whole 4-level assessment actually draws in a lot of emotionally focused couples therapy, which is one of the 2, I think, best established. There are now a few others, but emotionally focused couples therapy and integrative behavioral couples therapy, the 2 with the most research historically. So yes, sometimes you can look at it as EFT on steroids for couples, but what the beauty of this approach is how you're going to assess and intervene with intrapsychic symptoms like depression and anxiety is the exact same that you're going to use to intervene with couples and families. And so that's why it's just a synthesis. I mean, it's just like one model that does it all. So yes, so the couples stuff, and what's nice is it even gives you more degrees of freedom than many of the other couples approaches. And you're going to be doing the exact same thing you do with depression. You're just going to do it, the same assessment you use there, you're going to be using with couples. But we also do teach enactments, which is a unique intervention when you have a couple or family. I say that, but the truth is, empty chair technique is an enactment. And so you can do it with individuals, couples, and families. So delete that. I can even synthesize enactments, because if you look at the empty chair from Gestalt therapy, it's an enactment. And I teach you how to do that with and without multiple people there. Okay, Michelle is having trouble accessing the quiz, so I'll have my assistant jump on that, and maybe she can pop in here and let us know if it may not have been published correctly, because you're the first group to have access to it. Awesome, awesome. Thank you, thank you. Okay, I'm looking at some of these other questions that have been here. Mark is asking, what do the clients hope for when they come in? They're hoping we're going to help them solve their problems, but they really want to feel understood and not just have those interventions kind of thrown at them. And there is something, if you move too quickly to giving a prepackaged intervention, it's like the clients can reject that is the problem. They can go home, they can have a friend poo-poo it or disagree, and then they can reject your idea. And what's so beautiful about entering the holodeck and working within the client's meaning-making system is when they go home, they cannot unsee what we talked about because it came from their meaning-making system. Okay, thank you, thank you. Awesome, awesome. I'm glad it looks like people are enjoying it. I think I've got most of the, what do you call it again? Most of the questions answered. It does, any issues with the quiz should be fixed, so refresh your page and see if you can get the quiz to come back up. So, okay, but yeah, you go ahead and take the quiz now. That is absolutely fine. We're opening it. Yeah, I had put it for the 5th because the video is not going to probably be uploaded. It might be uploaded by this afternoon, but I like to give us 24 hours to get the video uploaded. So I had locked it down, but we're going to open it since I announced that you could. Yeah, so and then if the question is, do I have a specific course just on couples therapy? Not at the moment, and it is at this point really connected to the unifying framework, because that's just, I think, the most efficient way to work. So thank you all so much. Awesome. Michelle is saying the quiz is visible. So yes, you're the first group has access. We have a couple options for people to attend this, and the video will be up shortly as well. Awesome, awesome. Oh, Lori saying thank you all. For that we did for Maui. Yes, yes. Well, absolutely, our pleasure. And so, yeah, hopefully, I hope the world has fewer moments like that in life. But yeah, I am a licensed mental health provider in Hawaii, and just helping get the support groups up. But we, just so you all know, if you didn't know, if you weren't on those email chains back then, what they did in Maui, which was brilliant, and I did learn that it has been done in some other areas when there has been natural disasters or other disasters, is to create Zoom support rooms for the first responders. And just so you know, they needed those rooms and used those rooms mostly late at night when they couldn't sleep. So, but the Maui did a phenomenal job putting all of those groups together. And I hope you don't need to learn from their experiences, but just so you know, it was great. It was great for us, I think, for to be able to help out in a situation like that when you're watching such tragedy unfold. I think it gives us as mental health providers a way to lend a hand and to be there. And for a lot of the folks who said, just knowing that other people from around the world were willing to give up an hour or two of their time to lend a hand, help them with their healing journey, which is still going to be a very, very long one. And so as we see these things happen around the world, just know that is one way that we can contribute as mental health providers. Yeah. So, Lori's still here. Yeah, it was an awesome experience to be a part of. And I met really interesting people from all over the world. And so it's just something to be mindful of and just know that, that it does help to have people outside the region volunteer their time. A, doing the midnight ones is not so brutal, but B, they have a little degree of some distance as well. But even, those providers, on other Hawaiian islands who are, more affected, but not as directly affected. It gives support from the outside to help those who are, at ground zero, doing some of the hardest work you can possibly do in this field. So good to know. And there were some amazing leaders out there in Maui accessing it. Patricia's having trouble accessing the quiz. Try refreshing your browser. It should appear. It should appear. Lori just said, I spent 3 weeks in Hawaii. Amazing experience, very humbling. Yes. Yeah. That's going to be a long, long recovery. Let's see. Tammy is asking, I guess, is asking, I have an individual that their spouse refuses to participate. What would you use in that court case? It's never a good sign. But, I will say this, and I even talk about it a little in my recent structural. I certainly teach it when we do. That's what this 4-level assessment. When you're working with an individual who's complaining about someone else in their world, most often their partner, often parent, child, or boss as well, it is more important to work systemically because you can actually inadvertently, and trying to be empathetic, introduce problems into that relationship system. And so what you want to do is then always track the interaction pattern. And what, so when the client says X, they say, because their partner's out there, the partner says Y, and how do they, what's the partner literally saying? What are they literally doing? And so you actually have to slow down a little bit more. And, I try to have them, because they'll often say my partner was so rude or dismissive, and that's all interpretation, right? My partner was rude. My partner was mean. My partner was dismissive. They don't respect me. They ignore me. That is all interpretation from your client's interpretive. That's, so I want to get back into what behaviors happened that led to that interpretation. It's obviously going to be slower. And sometimes, it may not be a situation where the relationship's necessarily savable, but slowing down, getting into their holodeck, what did they see? And how did they interpret it? And then understanding why they interpreted that way. And that is where I will normally bring in that kind of deeper, what I call the 4-level assessment, to really understand what happened. And in this case, not just from the client's perspective, but being sensitive to what's happening, how other people are seeing it. Okay. I hope that helps a little bit. Awesome. Yes, but that is a common one. You want to be very careful because inadvertently, so this is a good example, another place where empathy goes sideways. If you just empathize with someone who's complaining about their partner, boss, parent, child, whatever, you can inadvertently actually make the distress worse rather than better. And so you want to be very, very careful because empathizing and taking their side, it feels good, but you can actually contribute to the demise of the relationship with the best of intentions. So that's why I always say it's so important to work systemically with an individual if they have any complaints outside of their own head that relate to other people. And I've seen it happen over and over and over. And there is research to show that, when I was trained in the 90s, they were like, we had to warn clients that if you want to come in here and talk about your relationship problem, your partner's not here, there is a good chance that we will make things worse. So I don't hear that spoken so much anymore, but you need to be very good at thinking systemically. So even if you don't work with couples or families, if you work with people who complain about family members and partners, you need to get really good at thinking systemically or inadvertently with the best of intentions, trying to use empathy. There's a lot of minefields with empathy, and then the relationship one is one of the hottest minefields where a lot of people inadvertently go wrong. So yeah, awesome. Okay, Elizabeth is saying she took the quiz, but the eval isn't popping up. So hopefully we'll get that. Woohoo, Michelle says she passed the quiz. Awesome. Michelle saying I want to join the level 1 masterclass as I prepare for independent licensure. Please do it today and you get these cool interventions that you can use. And But I do think what you learn in the master class, their level 1 class, really it's personally transforming, it is career transforming, and I certainly want it to be an investment of time and money that pays back. I mean, hundredfold is literally my goal, is what I'm hoping. So if you're having trouble finding the quiz, refresh and it should appear. So if you can log into the course, you should see, you should be able to log in. Just use the email you used to register. And if you need to, click the password. It'll help you reset the password if you need to. Okay, so I'm getting a tip from my assistant that says, make sure that the solidify your knowledge lesson is marked as complete, and then you should be able to see the course eval. When you submit the quiz, it should automatically mark it as complete. Hopefully you're seeing that. But maybe you need to click on the last quiz question to get it to mark complete, and then it unlocks the course eval. Okay, great, you found it, love it, awesome. And you can email friendlyhelp@dianegayhart.com to if you're having some issues. friendlyhelp@dianegayhart.com. Awesome, awesome. And I am going to be posting a free gift for your clients. I did my TED Talk, and as part of that, I'm launching a 5-minute mental health for the general audience to help them use micro habits to build the 5 pillars of wellness. So also keep a lookout on this course. I'll email you when it posts, but I will be giving a gift for you and your clients. So Elizabeth, email friendlyhelp.com, because that is kind of odd, because normally when it's marked complete, we have them locked. That's how you have to do it for continuing education. You have to take a quiz to prove that you listened to what I had to say. Then you take the course eval and it has to unlock. Okay. So there's a question here about solution focused brief therapy. And so module 6 of my 7 modules in the Therapy That Works Unifying Framework is basically, I would think of it as structured solution-focused brief therapy on steroids. And I think solidifying the identity narrative, especially for someone who comes from a marginalized position, and that can be culturally, due to age, race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, social class, education level, the things we think of, but it can also be marginalized within your own family. You're the oddball in your family. You're the one who never quite fit in, right? Or just you've outgrown your family. You're so different from them. Anyone who feels marginalized from their family, friends, social group, you will find that this solidifying the narrative, and I add a level, ironically, of structure to solution-focused type of work, where we look at where did things go right, where could the problem could have happened but it didn't, and how do we narrate that at all 8 levels. And this is my favorite part when we get to this in the class in module 6. I talk about this is my favorite part. People are like, well, they didn't do their symptom this week, so what do I do now? Like, you think the work is done. I'm telling you, some of the most deep, emotional, powerful people are crying. We are crying, right? Is in doing this deep assessment and narration of the solution. And so I think with this, this builds on, solution focused is, and that idea of looking at the strengths and when things are working is essential, especially for marginalized clients. And it is deep work. And this is something most people don't understand until they're in my class. And then they're like, because, we're seeing a client together, a mixed reality simulation client together. And the therapist is like, okay, so they didn't get triggered at all. They handled it beautifully. What do I do now? And I'm like, oh my goodness, we've got like another full hour of session to go, where we are going to thicken that identity, bring it, and it is such deep work. It is so emotional. So if you think of solution focused as being super surface level, I'm telling you, this is the one that brings tears, usually of joy and beauty, and just solidifying. You have to solidify their identity narrative so much more, especially if there's any being on the outside of any type of group, whether it's just your family or whether it's a societal level of oppression. So powerful. And then the other thing that I add to solidifying gains is what I call the 5 pillars of wellness. And actually, this was what half of my TED talk was about, is that in mental health, we are like, oh, your symptoms have gone. We use the medical model. Okay, you're not having symptoms. You're done. Bye-bye. Have a good life. Good luck with that. And then half the people relapse within a year. We are a train wreck. We are a train wreck when it comes to solidifying gains. And so yes, making sure they are, when problem situations happen, they do not lapse into their symptomatic behaviors, but then, is really solidifying their identity around these healthier behaviors, thoughts, emotions, responses, but then also teaching them, how do you create a lifestyle, like literally a lifestyle that will maintain your mental health for years with the research that we have. We now know that there are 20 different physiological factors, from vitamins to gut health, that contribute to mental health symptoms, but there is no one for us to refer to see if this is affecting our clients. So what module 4 in this course is looking at, I do a whole tour of the DSM and a whole tour of the evidence base, and then looking at, when this is happening, refer to this type of specialist, because there's probably something physiological going on. And it's tough because, unfortunately, insurance doesn't like to pay for a lot of these more cutting edge tests. And as time goes on, they're going to have to, because the research is so strong. I mean, we know gut health, that most, is huge for mental health. More serotonin is produced in the gut than in the brain, okay? At least according to a research study I read last month. I'm like, what? Then what are these SSRIs doing? What are we doing? So helping people develop exercise routines, eating routines, sleep routines, and just healthy life habits using micro habits. So I only ask 1 to 5 minutes of change from anybody at any given time, but that help giving them the life skills to create a lifestyle that maintains their mental health. I strongly believe that all of us, even if you've got bipolar and schizophrenia, we should be looking, and our goal should be lifelong wellness. And it is a very achievable. We know the science behind it, what type of things need to happen. And so I think that is our goal for us ourselves as mental health professionals, as well as our clients. And that is why I call it therapy that works, because my job is to get you to have a lifetime of mental health and wellness. And I have done this with some of the most severe clients with limited resources, and I have done it with people who would seemingly have lots of resources and are more stuck than a lot of people, right? And from all walks of life, all social, economic, cultural backgrounds. There are some basic things that we can all be doing to maintain lifelong wellness, and I think it should be our goal, regardless of what our diagnosis might be. Let's see. Okay, lots of questions have come in. Woohoo. Okay. Isn't solution focused? Isn't it about assessments? So how does that fit in? You can layer any theoretical approach on this model, on the unifying framework. That's why it's a framework, not a theory, because you can, but solution focus uses, a lot of the scaling type of things, which you can definitely use. And I actually advocate using for a lot of that in this class, if it fits for you. There's so many ways to do this work well, and that the framework gives you the framework, the structure, and you can layer lots of different things on top of it. Okay. Does the second thing to do complete the course content? Oh, complete the course content, refer to the video. Okay, I will double check on that. But it may be, and so we'll have to.
Oh, I answered that question.
Oh, you did?
Below.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the course content evaluation.
Okay, the course content evaluation. Okay, she's got it. I have the best assistant in the world, Audrey Gayhart. She's in her master's program right now, learning to be a marriage family therapist. Okay, awesome. So some folks were agreeing with some of that. Great. Okay, awesome. Oh wow, I got 10 in the Q&A. Holy moly. Okay, great. Okay, I'm gonna go back, jump over here, answer these questions. Okay, so people are getting these answered. Quiz. Well, yes, the recording will be here to revisit. Absolutely. And the quiz is towards the bottom. I think you found it all. I'm looking at these names. Yes. So Ari, you can listen to this webinar. We will be posting the video shortly. You're not going to get an email to do the quiz. You have to log in to the course on therapythatworksinstitute.com/login. You should see the overcoming the 3 most common mistakes in psychotherapy course. Log into that. And below the video, which we'll post later today, towards the end, it'll say, get your CEs here. And that's where you'll find it. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So great to have you all here today. Thank you so much. I am not seeing any more questions. And I'm assuming, Audrey, if you saw questions on YouTube, you're popping them in here, which is awesome. But I think we're good. So I'm so glad. Good. Joy, good luck. I know you are starting your field work. Joy is another person who's been in my level 1 course, even before she started seeing clients. And so I know folks who come in early career are always so thankful to have this framework. It's really funny. This framework is really interesting because early in your career, it's like, oh my God, I see the picture and how it all fits together. And I'm less overwhelmed by all my theory textbooks. And the folks who've been doing this for decades, they're like, oh my God, you just organized all the thoughts in my head. And for the experienced people, what used to take like 80% of their brain power now takes 20. They're like, oh my God, I always thought these things sounded alike. I'm like, yeah, they do sound alike, don't they? So awesome, awesome. Great, great. And let us know how it goes. But so great to have you all here. Wishing you all the best. And those of you experiencing severe weather systems, I wish you all the best. And be well and take care. And I wish you a great rest of your day. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Bye-bye.